The lawyer's voice was steady and emotionless as he read from the document. I sat perfectly still in my chair, my hands gripped together, while my sister Vanessa leaned back with a satisfied smile already forming on her lips. "Everything goes to my daughter, Vanessa," the lawyer said calmly. The words hung in the air. I felt the blood drain from my face. Everything. Not some things. Not most things. Everything. The house. The business. The investments. The properties Dad had spent 40 years building. Vanessa's smirk grew wider. She looked around the room at our relatives, then turned to me with mock sympathy in her eyes. "Don't worry, little brother," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You were never meant to handle real money anyway. Dad knew that. We all know that." Laughter rippled through the room. Uncomfortable at first, then louder as people realized Vanessa was serious. My aunt covered her mouth, but I could see her shoulders shaking. My uncle looked away, grinning. I sat there, frozen, humiliated. But underneath the shock and embarrassment, something else stirred. A feeling I couldn't quite name yet. Something felt wrong about all of this. Deeply wrong. Outside the lawyer's office, people dispersed quickly. Nobody wanted to talk to the son who got nothing. I stood by my car, keys in hand, watching my sister accept congratulations from relatives who suddenly found her very interesting. Then I saw something that made my stomach twist. Vanessa hugged my wife Claire. Nothing unusual about that. They had always been friendly. But the hug lasted too long. And Vanessa leaned in close, whispering something directly into Claire's ear. Claire smiled. A real smile, not the polite kind. Her whole face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. She glanced at me over Vanessa's shoulder, then quickly looked away, the smile fading. I walked toward them, trying to appear casual. As I approached, they separated quickly. Too quickly. Vanessa stepped close to me, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "Some people just aren't built to win, Nathan. You've always been one of those people." She walked away, leaving me standing there with Claire. My wife wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the inheritance. Something else was happening here. Something I had been too blind to see. My name is Nathan Cooper, and I've always been the quiet one in our family. While Vanessa handled appearances and social connections, I ran my father's logistics company quietly from behind the scenes. I fixed crises no one knew about. I covered debts no one saw. I worked late into the night solving problems that would have destroyed the business if they had become public. Vanessa handled the presentations. She met with clients, attended networking events, posted on social media about our family empire. She was the face everyone saw. But I was the one who made sure everything actually worked. Dad knew that. He told me so many times. Late at night in his office, he would thank me for keeping things running smoothly. He would say, "You understand how things really work, Nathan. That's rare. So why would he leave me nothing? Why would he give everything to Vanessa, who barely understood the operational side of the business, who had never balanced a budget or negotiated with suppliers or handled the countless small disasters that threatened us constantly? It didn't make sense. Dad wasn't cruel. He wasn't unfair. This didn't match the man I knew. My marriage to Claire had never been perfect, but I thought it was stable. We had been together for 6 years, married for 4. I worked long hours, sometimes 70 or 80 hours a week, keeping Dad's business running. I provided everything Claire needed. A nice house, a reliable income, security. I trusted her completely. Never questioned where she went or who she talked to. Never checked her phone or doubted her word. Trust was the foundation of everything we built together. But now, standing in the parking lot watching her avoid my eyes, small things started replaying in my mind. Details I had dismissed or ignored because I was too busy or too trusting. Late nights, when she said she was out with friends. Her phone that suddenly had a passcode I didn't know. The way she turned away from me in bed, facing the wall instead of snuggling close like she used to. The distance that had grown between us over the past year that I blamed on my work stress. I felt like I had missed something big. Something obvious. Something right in front of me that I had been too blind to see. At Dad's funeral 3 days later, I stood near the back while Vanessa greeted mourners at the front. She played her role perfectly, the grieving daughter, dabbing at her eyes with tissues, accepting condolences with grace. I noticed Claire standing off to the side, her phone out. She was texting someone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. When I moved closer to see who she was messaging, I caught a glimpse of the name at the top. Vanessa. That wasn't unusual by itself. Claire and Vanessa had always gotten along. But something about the way Claire was texting, the urgency, the focus, felt different. and when she noticed me approaching, she quickly turned her phone face down and slipped it into her purse. "Who are you texting?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Just checking in on people," she said vaguely. I saw Vanessa's name. "Yeah, just making sure she's okay. This is hard for her." The explanation made sense, but her body language didn't match her words. She shifted her weight, crossed her arms, created physical distance between us even though we were standing close together. I let it go, but I didn't forget. Later that evening, I tried asking about it again. We were home, getting ready for bed, and I approached the subject carefully. I didn't want to seem paranoid or controlling. "You and Vanessa have been talking a lot lately," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Claire's response came too fast. "We're just supporting each other. Your dad's death has been hard on both of us." But her tone was rehearsed. Like she had prepared this answer in advance, practiced it, made sure it sounded natural. I had been married to her long enough to know when she was being spontaneous and when she was performing. "What do you talk about?" I pressed gently. "Just family stuff. The funeral arrangements. How everyone's coping." She turned away from me, busying herself with putting on pajamas. "Why are you interrogating me?" "I'm not interrogating. I'm just asking." "Well, it feels like you're accusing me of something." I dropped it. But that night, when we got into bed, Claire did something she had never done before. She turned her back to me completely, facing the wall, putting a pillow between us like a barrier. For the first time in our entire marriage, we slept like strangers. But I had been preparing for something like this, even though I hadn't known exactly what. Months ago, maybe 6 or 7 months back, I started having a feeling. Nothing concrete. Just a sense that something was off. The way Claire acted. The way Vanessa looked at her. Small inconsistencies in stories that didn't quite line up. So I had started documenting things. Not because I knew what was happening, but because Dad had taught me a fundamental principle that guided everything I did. Prepare before the storm shows itself. I began taking screenshots of our bank accounts, saving emails, recording dates and times when Claire said she was one place but seemed to be somewhere else. I set up automatic backups of our financial records to a secure cloud account she didn't know about. I even installed an app on my phone that could record conversations when activated. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I would never need any of this, that I was wasting time and energy on suspicions that would turn out to be nothing. But I kept doing it anyway, because something in my gut told me to prepare. 2 weeks after the funeral, I couldn't ignore my suspicions anymore. Claire had gone out, saying she was meeting friends for dinner. I waited until I was certain she was gone, then I did something I had never done before. I checked her phone. She had left it charging in the bedroom, and I still knew her old passcode pattern. She had changed just one number, easy enough to figure out with a few tries. Inside, I found what I was afraid of finding. Messages between her and Vanessa going back over a year. Not sisterly messages. Not friendly check-ins. Intimate messages. Messages that made my hands shake as I scrolled through them. Photos from trips Claire said were with her college friends. But in the unedited versions saved in her message thread with Vanessa, my sister was there. Standing close to Claire, holding her hand, kissing her in some of the pictures. The messages weren't just recent. They weren't just about grief or supporting each other through Dad's death. This had been going on for a long time. Over a year at minimum. Maybe longer. I sat on our bed, Claire's phone in my trembling hands, reading through a relationship I never knew existed. A relationship that had been happening in parallel with our marriage. I kept scrolling, going deeper into the message history. That's when I found something even worse than the affair. Messages about money. About waiting. About timing things carefully. Once everything transfers, we can finally be together properly. Vanessa had written 6 months ago. Claire's response. How much longer do we have to wait? Not long. Dad's getting worse. The lawyer says everything is in order. Just have to be patient. My stomach turned. They weren't just having an affair. They had been planning this. Planning my financial destruction. Planning to take everything and leave me with nothing. Another message from 3 months ago. Vanessa, make sure Nathan doesn't suspect anything. Keep him focused on work. Claire, he's so busy with the company he barely notices anything anymore. We're safe. They had been strategizing, coordinating, making sure I stayed blind and distracted while they executed their plan. Every late night I worked, every crisis I solved, every hour I spent keeping Dad's business running. They were counting on that, using my dedication against me. The affair was devastating. But this conspiracy, this calculated betrayal, cut even deeper. I started digging into our financial records with new eyes. What I found made me sick. Over the past 2 years, money had been moving from accounts Dad controlled. Small amounts at first, barely noticeable. Then larger sums as time went on. The transfers went to accounts I didn't recognize. When I traced them using the documentation access Dad had given me months before he died, I found they were shell accounts. Accounts set up under business names that existed only on paper. Vanessa's name appeared on the registration documents for these accounts. But so did another name that shocked me, Claire's. My wife had been helping Vanessa drain Dad's accounts. Using information I had shared with her about the business structure, account numbers, and access codes. Information I had trusted her with, because I thought we were partners building a life together. They had been stealing from my dying father. From my family. From the business I had worked so hard to protect. And they had been doing it systematically, carefully, covering their tracks by routing money through multiple accounts before it reached its final destination. I found transfers disguised as business expenses, payments to fake vendors, consulting fees to companies that didn't exist. All of it adding up to hundreds of thousands of dollars over 2 years. The financial theft led me to dig deeper into the legal documents surrounding Dad's estate. I pulled up property records, deed transfers, and documents that had been filed with the county in the months before Dad died. What I found made my blood run cold. Property transfers moving real estate from Dad's name to Vanessa's. Legal papers giving her power of attorney over his medical and financial decisions. Documents signed with Dad's name. But something was wrong with the signatures. I had seen my father's signature thousands of times. I had watched him sign documents in his office, had helped him review and approve papers for years. I knew the exact way his hand moved, the specific pressure he applied, the distinctive way he formed certain letters. These signatures were close. Very close. Someone had practiced them, studied them, tried to replicate them perfectly. But they weren't exact. The angle was slightly different. The flow of the pen didn't match. The pressure points were wrong. Someone had forged my father's signature on legal documents. Documents that transferred millions of dollars in assets to Vanessa while Dad was sick and vulnerable. My hands shook as I held the papers. This wasn't just betrayal or affair or theft. This was fraud, forgery, elder abuse, criminal activity that had been planned and executed while my father trusted the people around him. I needed to think clearly. I needed to remember everything Dad had told me over the years. So I drove to his house, the house that was now legally Vanessa's, though she hadn't moved in yet. I still had my key. I let myself in quietly, making sure no one saw me arrive. The house felt empty without Dad's presence. I walked through the familiar hallways to his study, the room where we had spent so many late nights working together. Standing in that study, surrounded by his books and papers, I let my mind drift back through our conversations. Dad had always been careful, strategic. He thought 3 moves ahead in every situation. Then I remembered something specific. About 3 years ago, maybe a bit more, Dad had called me into his study late one night. He showed me something in his desk, a hidden compartment I hadn't known existed. At the right time, you'll understand why I'm showing you this, he had said mysteriously. I hadn't thought about that moment in years. But now, standing in his empty study, I rushed to the desk. My fingers felt along the underside of the middle drawer, searching for the release mechanism he had shown me. There, a small button, almost invisible. I pressed it and heard a soft click. A panel popped open, revealing a hidden space. Inside the hidden compartment was a single manila envelope. Thick, heavy with papers. On the front, in Dad's unmistakable handwriting, were 2 words. For you. Not my name. Just for you. But I knew it was meant for me. Dad had known I would be the one to find it. He had planned for this moment years in advance. My hands trembled as I broke the seal and pulled out the contents. Legal documents, bank statements, property records, all organized neatly, all pointing to something I had never known existed. A private trust, established 7 years ago, long before Dad got sick. Assets held under names I didn't recognize. Properties in different states. Investment accounts in banks I had never heard of. Offshore holdings structured through layers of legal protection. And every single document listed me as the sole beneficiary. The trust contained millions. Real estate worth more than everything in the public estate combined. Investment portfolios that generated steady income. Accounts that had been growing quietly for years while everyone focused on the visible family business. Dad had created a completely separate structure, hidden from Vanessa, hidden from everyone except the lawyers who managed it, lawyers whose names I didn't recognize, lawyers Vanessa had never met. At the bottom of the envelope was a letter, handwritten, dated 2 months before Dad died, when he was still lucid enough to write clearly. Nathan, it began. If you're reading this, then things probably went the way I suspected they might. Vanessa always wanted what people could see, the house, the business, the status. She never understood what actually matters. You understand that. You always have. I'm giving her what she wants. The visible things. The assets everyone knows about. She'll feel like she won. But those assets come with debts, obligations, problems she doesn't know about. The house is mortgaged. The business has structural issues that will surface soon. She'll get exactly what she asked for, and it will teach her the lessons she needs to learn. But you, Nathan, you get what matters. Real security. Assets that can't be touched or taken away. I've watched you work for years, quietly keeping everything together while your sister took credit. You never asked for recognition. You just did what needed to be done. This trust is my real legacy. Use it wisely. Protect yourself. And don't let anyone make you feel like you got nothing. You got everything that counts. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Dad had known. He had seen Vanessa's character clearly. And he had protected me in the only way that would work, by making it look like I got nothing while actually giving me everything. Vanessa wasted no time celebrating her victory. Within days of the will reading, she started making public announcements about her plans. She posted on social media about building her empire and taking the family business to new heights. She gave interviews to local business publications about her vision for the future. She started renovations on Dad's house immediately, hiring expensive contractors to gut the place and rebuild it according to her taste. She bought new furniture, new cars, threw parties for her friends and business associates. Claire moved out of our house 2 weeks later. She didn't even try to hide where she was going anymore. She moved directly into an apartment that, according to the lease I found online, was under Vanessa's name. They were together openly now. They posted pictures on social media, vacations, dinners, events. They didn't hide their relationship anymore. Why would they? They had won. They had the money, the property, the future they had planned. I saw them at a restaurant one evening. They sat close together, laughing, completely comfortable. When Vanessa noticed me across the room, she didn't look embarrassed or guilty. She just raised her glass in a mock toast and smiled. Claire looked at me once, then turned away like I was a stranger, like our marriage had never existed. They thought it was over. They thought they had already won. But their overconfidence made them sloppy. They stopped being careful, stopped watching what they said and where they said it. They felt safe now, untouchable. I waited. I watched. And I prepared. One night, I sat in my car outside the apartment where Claire now lived with Vanessa. I had recording equipment ready, the same app on my phone I had been using for months. The windows were open because it was a warm evening, and their voices carried down to the street. They were arguing about money, about the renovations costing more than expected, about bills coming due faster than Vanessa had anticipated. I turned on the recorder and listened. Vanessa's voice, frustrated and sharp. The contractors want another 100,000. The original estimate was way off. Claire's voice worried. Where are we going to get that? I thought everything was covered. It should be. But some of the accounts aren't as liquid as I expected. Dad must have had things structured differently than I realized. Can you access more of the business accounts? I'm trying. But the banks are asking questions now. Wanting documentation. Signatures. A pause. Then Vanessa's voice, quieter but clear enough for my recording. Dad barely knew what he was signing those last few months. It was so easy. He just signed whatever I put in front of him. Silence. Then laughter. Both of them laughing about how easy it had been to manipulate my dying father. I had everything I needed now. Confession of forgery. Elder abuse. All recorded clearly on my phone. I contacted the lawyers who managed the trust, the ones Dad had hired years ago, the ones Vanessa didn't know existed. I provided them with the evidence I had gathered, the forged signatures, the unauthorized transfers, the recordings of Vanessa confessing to manipulating Dad. They moved quickly and quietly. Within a week, multiple things happened at once. Vanessa's accounts suddenly froze. Her credit card stopped working. The bank that held the mortgage on Dad's house sent her official notices about irregularities in the ownership documents. Investigations were opened into the asset transfers. Her contractors stopped working when their checks bounced. The renovation on the house halted mid-construction, leaving it torn apart and unlivable. Vanessa had to move out, the house deemed unsafe in its current state. I watched from a distance as panic entered her life. She made frantic phone calls. She showed up at banks demanding explanations. She hired lawyers who asked questions she couldn't answer honestly. The money she thought she had wasn't accessible anymore. The accounts were locked pending investigation. Her comfortable future evaporated in days. And she had no idea I was behind any of it. She thought it was just bad timing. Banking errors. Random bad luck. It never occurred to her that her useless little brother had any power at all. The pressure started showing cracks in their relationship. I saw it on social media first. Claire stopped posting pictures with Vanessa. The vacation photos stopped. The romantic dinners disappeared from her feed. Then I heard from mutual friends that they were fighting. Loudly. About money, about the future, about whether Vanessa had really inherited what she claimed. Claire started posting vague messages about focusing on herself and taking time to reflect. The kind of posts people make when they're trying to exit a relationship without admitting it publicly. I ran into one of Claire's friends at a coffee shop. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me but came over anyway. I heard about the divorce filing, she said quietly. I'm sorry about everything. For what it's worth, Claire seems really stressed lately. She and Vanessa aren't doing well. Oh, I kept my voice neutral, interested but not eager. Money problems, I think. And Claire's realizing some things about the situation she didn't see before. Vanessa's empire was collapsing. And Claire, who had bet everything on my sister's success, was starting to realize she had chosen the wrong side. My phone rang late one evening. Claire's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. Nathan? Her voice was soft. The voice she used to use when she wanted something. Sweet and gentle and carefully calibrated to get a specific response. What do you want, Claire? I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About everything that happened. I think I made some mistakes. I said nothing. Let the silence stretch. Can we meet for coffee? Just to talk. I miss you. The manipulation was so transparent I almost laughed. She didn't miss me. She missed financial security. She missed having someone stable and reliable. Now that Vanessa's money was disappearing, Claire suddenly remembered the husband she had abandoned. I don't think that's a good idea, I said calmly. Please, Nathan. Just give me a chance to explain. To apologize. I know I hurt you, but maybe we can work through this. There's nothing to work through, Claire. Don't say that. We have history together. 6 years of history. That has to count for something. It did count for something. Until you threw it away. I hung up before she could respond. Then I called my lawyer and told him to proceed with the next step. Instead of meeting Claire for coffee, instead of giving her any chance to manipulate or sweet-talk her way back into my life, I filed for divorce. But not simple divorce papers. I filed with evidence attached. Copies of her messages with Vanessa proving the affair. Screenshots showing the timeline of their relationship overlapping with our marriage. Photos demonstrating they had been together while Claire was still living with me, still wearing her wedding ring, still pretending to be my faithful wife. But the evidence went beyond just adultery. I included documentation showing Claire had helped Vanessa access my parents' financial accounts. Bank statements showing she had provided information that allowed fraudulent transfers to occur. Messages where they discussed manipulating Dad and stealing from him. In our state, adultery affected asset division and divorce. But fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and financial crimes? Those changed everything. Claire wouldn't just lose her claim to marital assets. She would face legal consequences. My lawyer filed everything with the court and had the papers delivered to the apartment where Claire was staying. The apartment Vanessa was supposed to be paying for but couldn't anymore because her accounts were frozen. Claire would get nothing from our divorce. And depending on how deep the criminal investigations went, she might face charges alongside Vanessa. The investigations expanded rapidly once official authorities got involved. Financial forensics teams started examining the asset transfers. They found the forged signatures. They discovered the unauthorized account access. They traced the money Vanessa and Claire had moved and found patterns that couldn't be explained legitimately. State investigators interviewed family members, friends, Dad's doctors, and his former lawyers. The evidence mounted: forgery, fraud, elder abuse, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The charges grew more serious with each new discovery. Vanessa hired expensive lawyers, but they couldn't explain away the paper trail. The signatures that didn't match. The transfers that happened when Dad was heavily medicated. The shell accounts created in coordination with Claire. Criminal charges were filed. First against Vanessa, then against Claire as a co-conspirator. The district attorney's office built their case using the evidence I had provided plus their own investigation findings. The local news picked up the story. Daughter accused of defrauding dying father made headlines. Social media erupted with commentary. The same people who had celebrated Vanessa's inheritance now condemned her publicly. The business publications that had interviewed her about her vision pulled their articles. Her social media followers dropped by thousands as people distanced themselves from the scandal. Everything collapsed in weeks. The phone calls started coming in. Relatives who had laughed at me during the will reading. Family friends who had ignored me at the funeral. People who had treated me like I was invisible suddenly wanted to reconnect. "We didn't know what Vanessa was doing," my aunt said when she called. "We just assumed your father wanted things divided that way. We never suspected fraud." My uncle sent a long email apologizing for his behavior. "You were always the responsible one, Nathan. Your father used to tell me how much he relied on you. I should have questioned why he would leave you nothing." Cousins reached out on social media. Friends of the family sent messages expressing shock and support. The same people who had avoided me when they thought I was broke suddenly praised my character and work ethic. The narrative was rewriting itself in real time. I went from being the son who got nothing to being the victim of a criminal conspiracy. From being dismissed and forgotten to being recognized as the one who had actually kept everything together. People who had called me not meant to handle real money now described me as steady, trustworthy, and wise. The family's opinion of me transformed completely once they understood what had really happened. I accepted their apologies politely, but kept my distance. I had learned who these people really were when they thought I had nothing. That lesson was more valuable than their belated support. Vanessa showed up at my apartment late one evening. She looked different from the confident woman who had smirked at the will reading. Her hair was messy. Her clothes looked slept in. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "You did this," she said the moment I opened the door. Not a question, an accusation. I stepped aside and let her in. This conversation needed to happen eventually. Might as well be now. She stood in my living room, shaking with anger or fear or both. The investigations, the frozen accounts, everything falling apart. "That's you. You're behind all of it." "I just provided evidence of crimes," I said calmly. "You and Claire committed those crimes. I just made sure the right people knew about them. This is about revenge. About the inheritance. You couldn't handle that Dad chose me over you." I pulled out my laptop and opened it on the coffee table. "Sit down, Vanessa. There's something you need to see." She sat, more out of exhaustion than compliance. I showed her the documents from Dad's trust. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through property titles, investment accounts, offshore holdings. Millions in assets she had never known existed. "This is everything?" she whispered. "Everything that matters," I confirmed. "What you inherited. The house with its hidden mortgage? The business with its structural debts. Dad gave you the visible things. The appearance of wealth. But the actual wealth, the real security, that was always meant for me." Over the following months, the legal system processed everything. Official rulings confirmed fraud. The signatures were proven to be forgeries through handwriting analysis. The financial transfers were deemed unauthorized and criminal. Courts reversed the fraudulent property transfers. Assets Vanessa thought she controlled were stripped away. The public will was challenged and partially invalidated due to the circumstances under which it was created. Specifically, the fact that Dad had been manipulated and had signed documents he didn't understand. Criminal trials moved forward. Vanessa faced multiple felony counts: fraud, forgery, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and elder abuse. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution had recordings, documents, expert testimony, and the clear paper trail I had helped them build. She took a plea deal to avoid the maximum sentence. 5 years in prison, full restitution of stolen funds, and permanent loss of any claim to Dad's estate. Claire faced charges too. Her role was smaller than Vanessa's, but she had knowingly participated. She had provided information, helped access accounts, and conspired to defraud my parents. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a victim manipulated by Vanessa, but the messages I had saved told a different story. She also took a plea deal: 3 years probation, community service, and restitution payments. I gained full authority over the trust and all its legitimate assets. Dad's real legacy came under my proper control, managed by the lawyers he had chosen years ago. A year later, I stood outside that same lawyer's office where everything had started. The building looked the same. The parking lot felt familiar, but everything else had changed completely. I remembered Vanessa's words from that first day, her voice dripping with contempt. "You were never meant to handle real money anyway." But she had been wrong. I was exactly the person meant to handle it. Dad had known that. He had seen my character, my work ethic, my understanding of what really mattered. He had trusted me with the real foundation, while giving Vanessa the hollow shell. She had wanted the spotlight, the status, the appearance of winning. So Dad gave her exactly that. And in doing so, he taught her the hardest lesson she would ever learn: that what people can see isn't always what matters most. Meanwhile, I had been given substance, real wealth, actual security, the kind of legacy that couldn't be taken away by fraud or manipulation or betrayal. They had given Vanessa everything they could see. But Dad had left me what actually counted. I walked away from that building into bright sunlight, carrying the weight of real responsibility, but finally free from the weight of being underestimated. Truth had been my inheritance all along. And in the end, truth was the only thing that lasted.